You want me to cancel our trip to the Amalfi Coast because of your appointment. That is what my daughter said when I asked if she could drive me to chemotherapy. I did not ask for much, just a ride, 40 minutes each way. But somehow that small thing landed on top of a vacation she had already booked, and she sighed when she said it. She sighed like I had asked her to give up a kidney. It was not the words that cut me. It was the way she said the word appointment. Like I was being dramatic. Like chemotherapy was some little errand, the same as picking up dish soap or getting her nails done. Maybe we can move some things around after we get back, she added. Okay. I swallowed the lump that came up in my throat and I said, sure, honey, do not worry about it. That is what I said out loud. What I did not say was that I did not choose this. I did not choose the cancer. I did not choose the nausea or the aching in my bones or the tiredness that makes me grip the kitchen counter every morning just to stay on my feet. And I sure did not choose to feel like a chore on the calendar of the very person I once carried inside me. I hung up. I sat still for a long while and watched the light move across the floor. It was 11:37 in the morning by the old clock in the hallway. I remember noticing the time. The house was quiet, that sharp kind of quiet that settles in right after you are disappointed. I stood up slow, feeling the stiffness in my knees, and I put the kettle on. I made tea I never drank. I just sat there holding the warm cup looking at nothing. There was a small circle on the calendar on the fridge. Treatment. Room 206. I had drawn that circle myself a week before, back when I still thought I would not be going in alone. My name is Bonnie Hartley. I taught second grade for 31 years in the same brick school on Maple Street. I have wiped noses and tied shoes and taught more children to read than I could ever count. I know how to be patient. I know how to wait. I spent my whole life being the steady one, the one who showed up early and stayed late. So it is a strange thing at 78 years old to find out you cannot get a ride from your own daughter who lives 15 minutes away. That is the part I kept turning over in my head. Lauren does not live in another state. She lives across town. Craig, her husband, lives right there with her. My grandson Caleb is 16 and lives in that same house. They are not far. They are not strangers passing through. They are a short drive down the same roads I used to walk to work. And still the answer was no. I taught in a time before smartboards and computers, when a teacher had a piece of chalk and a room full of faces, and that was the whole world. I knew every one of those faces. I knew which child came to school hungry, and which one had a father who drank, and which one just needed somebody to say good morning to them like they mattered. You learn to read a room of children the way a farmer reads the sky. You learn that a child who acts out is almost always a child who is scared, and that the kindest thing you can do is not to fix them, but to be steady for them. I was steady for a lot of children who did not have steady anywhere else. That was the whole point of me, I used to think. To be the one solid thing on a hard day. Funny, is it not, how the thing you give the world becomes the thing the world stops seeing in you? I was steady for so long that everyone just decided steady was a machine that ran on its own. Nobody checks on the furniture. Nobody asks the wall how it is holding up. And I let them think it because that was easier than admitting I was tired. I want you to understand something about me before I go on. I do not fall apart easy. I raised Lauren by myself after her father passed. He was a good man gone too soon, and he left me a little life insurance and a mountain of quiet. I went back to teaching 2 weeks after the funeral because the rent did not care that I was grieving. I graded papers at this same kitchen table until midnight. Then I got up at 6 and did it again. I bought school supplies with my own money for the kids who came in with empty backpacks, because a child who cannot see the board or hold a pencil cannot learn, and I was not going to let that stop them. I gave a lot of things away in my life. I never expected to be one of them. That afternoon I opened my phone. I should have put it down, but I did not. And there it was. My daughter, tan and smiling, holding a drink the color of a sunset, standing on a stone terrace over the bluest water you ever saw. Craig had his arm around her. The caption said we needed this. Family first. Family first. I read those 2 words until they stopped meaning anything at all. When exactly did I stop being part of that word? I did not sleep that night. Not from the pain, not from the medicine, just from the churn of it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that terrace, that water, those 2 words. I never once blamed my daughter for needing a rest. Everybody needs a rest. What I blamed her for was the pretending. Just tell me the truth. Tell me you did not want to sit in a waiting room that smells like disinfectant. Tell me you did not want to hear the rattle I make when I am too tired to sit up straight. That I could have understood. But do not post pictures about gratitude and family, and then leave your own mother to find her own way to a cancer ward. The next morning I called the clinic myself and asked what they had for transportation. They had a shuttle, a van twice a day. Sometimes you waited in the cold, the woman said, and the driver did not always walk you to the door, but it was something. Will you be coming alone? She asked. I paused. Then I said yes, I will manage. She hesitated. You sure you do not want someone with you for the first one? She said. It helps. I smiled into the phone, even though she could not see it. No, dear, I said. I have been alone before. I did not tell her that I delivered Lauren by myself in a county hospital during an ice storm because her father was stuck on the highway and did not make it in time. I did not tell her that I raised that girl on a teacher's paycheck sewing her Halloween costumes by hand and skipping my own lunch, so hers was packed. I did not tell her that I once went a whole winter with the heat turned low so I could pay for her braces. I did not say any of it. I just confirmed the appointment and I thanked the woman kindly. Because that is what you do when you are an old woman. You keep the story to yourself. You let everyone believe you are fine. The shuttle came at 8:05. A beat-up white van with a young driver who did not look much older than Caleb. He glanced at my name on his clipboard and nodded toward the back. The step up was high. I gripped the handle with both hands and pulled myself in, trying not to let my face show how much it hurt. He did not offer a hand. I did not expect one. There were 3 others already inside, an old man with skin the color of candle wax, a woman knitting something blue without even looking down at it, and a young girl staring at her phone like it was breathing for her. Nobody spoke. What was there to say? We all had our bags and our silence and the weight of a thing we were not supposed to complain about anymore. The ride took 47 minutes. I know because I counted every turn. When we got there, the driver did not look back. I climbed down slow, one hand on the door, and I walked myself toward the entrance. Room 206 smelled like bleach and peppermint. Too clean and too sweet at the same time. A nurse in bright scrubs met me at the door. Her name tag said Rosa. First time she asked gentle as anything. I nodded. She led me to a big, soft chair and tucked a warm blanket around my legs like I was one of my own students. I hated how good it felt. I hated how kind she was. It made everything inside me pull tight because kindness was the one thing I could not stand right then. It was too close to what I had been missing. I looked around that room while she got things ready. There were maybe a dozen of us in those big chairs, all hooked up to our bags of medicine, all pretending to read magazines we were not reading. An old fellow across from me had his wife beside him, and she was holding his hand and doing a crossword, and every few minutes she would ask him a clue just to keep him talking. A younger woman had her sister there. I could tell they were sisters by the way they bickered. Everyone had somebody. Everyone but me and one other woman down at the end, and the 2 of us caught each other's eye once and gave each other a little nod. The nod that says yes. Me too alone. We will not talk about it. She got the needle in and adjusted the drip and told me to rest, that they would keep an eye on me. I closed my eyes and listened. The soft beep of the machines. A cough. A page turning. Somebody breathing slow 2 chairs over. Nobody cried. Nobody ever does. There is an etiquette to suffering. You do it quiet so you do not make anyone else uncomfortable. 2 hours later I was done. I stood up too fast and had to grab the arm of the chair to keep from going down. Rosa came hurrying over. Easy now, Mrs. Hartley, she said. Sit a second. I am fine, I told her sharper than I meant to. Just dizzy. She did not argue. She sat down next to me and handed me a cup of water. Is someone picking you up? She asked. No, I said, and I looked away. I will wait for the shuttle. She was quiet a moment. Then she said, Okay, we will make sure you are steady before you go. More kindness. Any more of it and I was going to break right there in that chair. I waited in the front room sipping the water, watching the parking lot through the glass. Cars pulling in and out. A husband holding his wife's purse while she fixed her scarf. A grown son helping his mother down off the curb. And me. Alone. A paper cup slowly crumpling in my hand. When the shuttle finally came, the driver was bored and quiet. You Hartley, he said. Yes. He opened the door and did not say another word until he dropped me off. At home, I kicked off my shoes and sat down at the kitchen table and looked at the backsplash I tiled myself 20 years ago. The grout lines are not perfect, but they held. So did I. For a long time. I checked my phone. Nothing. Not from Lauren, not from Craig. I did not need flowers. I did not need a fuss. But a how did it go, Mom would not have killed anybody. I scrolled, and that is when I saw the new pictures. This time they were on a boat. Lauren in a long dress with the wind in her hair. Craig with a glass of wine. My Caleb sitting off to the side, not smiling much, looking out at the water like he would rather be somewhere else. The caption said, "Living our best life." So grateful. I stared at that word. Grateful. And something in me that had been quiet for years stood up. I had made excuses for that girl for decades. She is busy, I would say. She is tired. She means well. But there is a line, and that afternoon I finally saw where mine was. Not in anger, not yet, in something clearer than anger. That night I got the old photo box down from the top shelf of the hall closet. Not the albums. The albums were for company, all neat and arranged. The box was for me. Loose and honest, full of bent corners and coffee rings and the truth. I sat at the kitchen table with a blanket around my shoulders and I spread the pictures out. Here was one of me holding Lauren wrapped in a hospital blanket. I was 25 and scared to death. Her father had made it in an hour-late snow all over his coat, apologizing. Here was our first little apartment, the one with the radiator that hissed like a snake. Lauren was 4, sitting up on the counter, dipping a spoon into a bowl. We were making pancakes for supper, not because it was fun, but because flour and eggs were what we had that week. Here was her high school graduation. I was standing next to her in a dress I hemmed myself, and she was gripping my arm tight when they called her name. There were so many pictures with only one grown-up in them. Me. Lauren was in the photos. She was just never behind the camera. I did this alone. Not perfect. Lord knows I was impatient and stubborn and too tired some nights to really listen. But I showed up, every single time, and now I could not even get a ride to Chemo. Not because they were working, not because of some emergency, but because they were on a boat in Italy tagging themselves with the word grateful. I put the pictures back in the box with hands that were shaking. Not from sadness, from something older than sadness. The cold, quiet kind of anger, the kind that does not shout, the kind that just makes everything clear. I made a sandwich I did not finish. I took 2 of my pills. I went to bed and lay there in the dark, listening to the house settle around me, the same house I had kept together through every storm for 40 years. And I thought, all right, now I have to decide what it is still worth, and to whom. I did not do anything the next day, or the day after. I let the anger cool into something I could use, and on the 3rd night I could not sleep, so I got up and I went to the spare bedroom, the one I had kept made up all these years for visits that stopped happening a long time ago. I opened the closet and pulled out the small fireproof safe and set it on the floor. The combination came back to my fingers on their own. One click, then another, and it opened. Inside were the papers, the deed to the house, my will, and the power of attorney I had signed 5 years ago, the one that gave Lauren control over my money and my medical decisions. "Mom, it is just a formality," she had said back then. "Everybody our age does this for their parents." I believed her. I signed it at this very table on a Thursday afternoon, and I did not read it close because why would I read something close when my own daughter was handing me the pen? But sitting there on the floor of that spare room at 2 in the morning, I looked at that power of attorney and I saw it for what it really was. Not a formality, a set of keys. Keys to everything I had left. And I had handed them over without a second thought. The house was the last real thing I owned. It was paid off. I had made the final mortgage payment 9 years ago and cried in this kitchen over a check. This house and my little pension, and what was left of Ray's insurance, that was all of it. And every year I had given more and more of the money away until the house was pretty much what remained. I picked up the folder. I carried it out to the kitchen, and I set it on the counter where I could see it. Then I sat down in the dark, and I waited for morning. Because in the morning I was going to call my lawyer. And for the first time in a very long time, I was not going to say the words, "Do not worry about it." I called Nancy Albright at 9 on the dot. She has been my lawyer for close to 20 years, and her voice has not changed one bit. Brisk, sharp, no patience for nonsense. "Bonnie Hartley," she said, like she had been expecting me. "What can I do for you?" "I need to make some changes," I told her. "What kind of changes?" she asked. "All of them," I said. There was a small pause on her end. Then she said, "Come in this afternoon, 2 o'clock. I took the shuttle downtown because I was not up to driving. I sat in her office with the folder in my lap, and she poured me a cup of coffee I did not touch. We had sat like this before years ago when I first set my affairs in order. Back then, I was only thinking about making things easy for Lauren. Simple, clean. She is my only child, I had said. She deserves it all. I meant it, too. I sat in that same chair 5 years later, and I was not so sure anymore. I want to revoke the power of attorney, I said. All of it. The financial part and the medical part. And I want to change my will. Nancy set down her pen. That is a big move, Bonnie, she said. What happened? I did not want to tell her the whole story. I did not want to say it all out loud and live it twice. So I gave her one sentence. She left me to go to chemotherapy alone so she could drink wine on a boat in Italy. Nancy looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded slow. All right, she said. Let us do this the right way. She explained it to me plain the way I always liked. Because I was revoking a power of attorney and cutting my only child out of my will, there was a chance Lauren might one day claim I was not in my right mind when I did it. People do that, Nancy said. They challenge the will after you are gone and say the old woman was confused. So we were going to close that door before it ever opened. She wanted a letter from my doctor dated stating that I was fully competent in making these decisions on my own. She wanted witnesses. She wanted everything airtight. I liked that. I liked turning the very thing they thought made me weak my age, my sickness, into the thing that made me untouchable. Let them try to say I did not know what I was doing. I would have it in writing that I did. That was the teacher in me, I suppose. 31 years of paperwork teaches you a thing or two. You learn that the people who get hurt are usually the ones who trust that a handshake is enough, and that the people who stay safe are the ones who keep the records and date the papers and make sure everything is written down where nobody can twist it later. I had spent my whole life trusting that love was enough, and that a handshake between a mother and a daughter did not need anything more behind it. Look where that got me. So this time I was going to do it the other way. This time I was going to be the woman with the file folder and the doctor's letter and every signature in its place. I was going to make myself a fortress. And it felt good. Lord help me, it felt good to build a wall for once instead of a bridge. Then Nancy did something I did not expect. She pulled out a legal pad, and she said, Before we redo the will, I want to look at the accounts the power of attorney gave her access to. Standard practice, she said. When we revoke, we do a full accounting, just so we know where everything stands. I gave her the account numbers. She said she would pull the records, and we would meet again in a few days. I want to tell you about the days in between, because that is when the second thing happened. I had my follow-up with Dr. Harmon that Thursday. Same shuttle, different faces this time. An older couple holding hands. A young man in a suit who looked too healthy to be in that van. Dr. Harmon met me with his warm eyes and his dry handshake. Bonnie, he said, thanks for coming in. We got your labs back. I sat down and folded my hands. He clicked through the screen. The markers are holding steady, he said. That is good news. It means the treatment is doing what we want. We will stay on the same schedule for now. Then he paused and looked at me over his glasses. Bonnie, he said, how are you managing with support? Do you have someone helping you get to your treatments? The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to lie. It was habit by then. I am fine, I almost said. But something stopped me. No, I said instead. Not really. He turned his chair toward me. Do you want me to set you up with the oncology social worker? He asked. There are transport options. There are people who can help. I shook my head. I am managing, I told him. But thank you. He did not push. He just nodded and wrote something down. And then before I left, I asked him for something. I need a letter, I said. For my lawyer. Just stating that I am of sound mind in making my own decisions. He looked at me a moment, and I think he understood more than I said. Of course, he said. I will have it drawn up. Bonnie is everything all right. I said it is going to be, and I meant it. That letter was the first stone. I was building something now, brick by brick, the way I used to set up a lesson plan. Quiet and careful and in order. Afterward, I went to sit in the waiting room to catch my breath before calling the shuttle. And that is where the second thing happened. A woman about my daughter's age was sitting across the room, and she kept looking at me. Finally, she stood up and came over, and her face was all lit up with something between hope and disbelief. Mrs. Hartley, she said. Is that you? Mrs. Hartley from Maple Street School. I did not recognize her at first. 40 years does a lot to a face. But then she said her name. Teresa. Teresa Cole. And it came back to me all at once. A skinny little girl in the second grade back in the 80s. The one who came to school in the same thin dress all winter. The one whose shoes had holes in the bottom that let the snow in. I remembered because I had bought her a pair of boots that year and left them on her desk without a word so she would not feel ashamed. I remembered making sure there was always an extra lunch in my bag and setting it down next to hers like it was nothing. Teresa Cole was standing in front of me now, 50 years old with tears in her eyes. "You will not remember this," she said, "but you changed my whole life. I was a mess of a kid. Nobody at home, and you were the first grown-up who ever looked at me like I mattered. I remember the boots. I remember the lunches. I knew it was you. I never forgot. I did not know what to say. I taught for 31 years. You do not always know what sticks. You do the small kind things, and you send them out into the world, and you never hear back." And here was one of them standing in front of me in a cancer clinic all grown. She told me she had become a nurse. Can you believe that she said, and she laughed a little through the tears, "I became a nurse because of you, because you were the first person who ever took care of me, and I wanted to do that for other people." She had worked the pediatric floor at the county hospital for 22 years. All those years I had been retired and alone in my house thinking my working life was done and gone, and it had been out there the whole time walking around in the shape of a grown woman putting bandages on children. You never know. You truly never know what you set in motion. I remembered more about her the longer we talked. I remembered the parent-teacher night nobody came to for her and how I stayed late and just sat with her and let her show me her drawings so she would not have to sit in an empty room. I remembered the Christmas I slipped a wrapped present into her cubby with no name on it. I had forgotten I even did those things. That is the strange part. The person who did them forgets, but the person they were done for never does. "What are you doing here?" I asked her, and my voice was not steady. "My mother," she said. "She is upstairs. Ovarian. She is doing all right, but the treatments wear her out, so I drive her every week." She looked at me. "And you? Are you a patient?" "Second round today," I said. She nodded slow. "You here by yourself?" she asked. I did not answer, and that was answer enough. Her face changed. "Where is your family?" she said. "Not unkind, just plain." I looked away. "It is complicated," I said. Teresa sat down next to me. She did not press. She just sat with me the way you sit with somebody at a funeral. Then she said, "I am here every Thursday for my mother anyway. Your treatment days, when are they?" I opened my mouth to tell her I was fine. I was managing all the words I had been saying to everybody. But I was so tired of those words. "Thursdays and Mondays," I said. "Mostly." "Then I am driving you," she said. It was not a question. "My mother's on Thursday, you on Monday, and I will figure out how to do both on the days they line up. Do not argue with me, Mrs. Hartley. You bought me boots when I had none. I can give you a ride. I want you to sit with that a minute the way I did. A woman I had not seen in 40 years who owed me nothing, who had her own sick mother to care for, offered me more in 5 minutes than my own daughter had offered me in years. No hashtags, no pictures, no gratitude posted anywhere for anyone to see. Just a hand held out quiet on a Thursday afternoon. That night I sat with it a long time. I thought about all the years I told myself that family was blood, that Lauren would come around, that the distance was just her being busy. And here was proof sitting plain in front of me that the people who show up are not always the ones you are related to. Sometimes they are the little girl you gave your lunch to in 1983. It was not everything, but it reminded me what showing up actually looks like, and it made everything my daughter had not done look even worse in the light. A few days later, Nancy called me back to her office. Her voice was different on the phone. "Careful. Bonnie," she said, "I have the account records. I think you should come in and look at these with me." I went in the next morning. She had papers spread across her desk and a look on her face I did not like. "Bonnie," she said, "sit down. I want to walk you through something." She had pulled the statements from the accounts the power of attorney gave Lauren access to, and there in black and white were transfers. Not one, not two, a whole string of them going back almost 2 years. Money moved out of my accounts into accounts that were not mine. Some of it small, some of it not small at all. And the biggest one, Nancy tapped it with her pen, was dated 3 weeks before the trip to Italy. She used the power of attorney, Nancy said. Legally, technically, she had the access. You gave it to her, but a power of attorney comes with a duty. She is only allowed to use that access for your benefit, your care, your bills, not for her own vacations, not for herself. And Bonnie, this money did not go to your care. It went to her. I sat very still. I had known Lauren was careless with me. I had known she was distant, forgetful, too busy for her own mother. What I had not known, what I had never once imagined, was that she had been quietly reaching into my accounts and taking. That the trip that left me alone in that waiting room had been paid for in part with money she had lifted right out from under me. Nancy walked me through it line by line, patient as anything, because she could see I was having trouble taking it in. Here, she said, this one and this one. She showed me the dates. She showed me how the transfers had started small, almost 2 years back, a few $100s here and there, the kind of thing you might not notice, and then how they had gotten bigger over time, the way these things do. Once a person learns that nobody is watching and nobody is going to say a word. The last one, the big one before the trip, was not a few $100s. It was the kind of number that made my stomach turn. I thought about all the times over those 2 years that Lauren had told me money was tight for her and Craig. All the times I had felt bad for her, worried for her, offered to help. And the whole time she had a key to my accounts and was using it. I had been feeling sorry for the very person who was robbing me. That was the part that sat like a stone. Not just the money. The way she had let me worry about her while she took from me. There is a name for this, Nancy said gently. What she did. It is called elder financial abuse, and it is against the law. I did not cry. I want you to know that. I sat there in that chair, and I felt the last soft thing in me go hard and quiet. All those years I had told myself she meant well. All those years I made her excuses. And the whole time this. What do you want to do? Nancy asked me. I thought about it. I thought about being a good mother, the kind who forgives, who does not make a scene, who keeps the story to herself. I had been that woman my whole life, and it had brought me to a cancer clinic alone in a battered van. I want to revoke the power of attorney today, I said, right now. I want the bank notified this afternoon that she has no access to anything of mine effective immediately. I want her sent a formal demand for a full accounting of every dollar she moved, and I want the will changed. Nancy nodded and started writing. All right, she said. Tell me about the will. I reached into my purse and pulled out a photo. Caleb, my grandson from a couple years back before he got so tall, grinning with a gap in his teeth. This boy, I said. He is 16 now. He is the only one in that house who still sees me. He is the only one who calls just to talk. I want everything to go to him. Nancy nodded. Because he is a minor, she said, we will set up a trust. The money will be held and managed until he comes of age. I will be the trustee if you want, so no one in that family can touch it or pressure him. He gets it clean on his own when he is old enough to know what to do with it. I would say 25. 25, I agreed. And Lauren, Nancy asked. I want her name off everything I said. Every account, every document. Except one line. I want it written down in plain words that leaving her out was my own clear decision made in my right mind on this day. So no one can ever say I forgot her. I did not forget her. I chose. Nancy wrote it all down. When we were finished, she came around the desk and put her hand over mine. Do you feel okay about this? She asked me. I thought about the boots I bought for a little girl 40 years ago, and how that little girl was going to drive me to Chemo on Monday. I thought about my daughter reaching into my accounts and posting the word grateful. I thought about the house and the letter from my doctor and my grandson's gap-toothed grin. I feel I said like I just stood up for the first time in years. And I did. I walked out of that office standing straighter than I had in a long, long while. The papers were signed. The bank was called. My daughter did not know it yet, but the keys were already out of her hands. And somewhere across town in a house I had helped pay for more times than I could count. The trip was over, and she was about to come home to a very different mother than the one she left. Caleb called me on a Tuesday night about a week after I signed the papers. I did not expect it. His name came up on my phone, and my heart did a little jump before I even answered. Hi, Grandma, he said. His voice was low, careful, not the bright, out-of-breath voice he usually had. Are you busy? Never too busy for you, I said. What is it, honey? He was quiet a second. Then he said, Grandma, I have to tell you something, and I do not want you to be mad at me for not saying it sooner. I did not know what to do. I sat down at the table. Go ahead, I said. He took a breath. Before we went on the trip, he said, I heard Mom and Dad talking. Late in the kitchen. They did not know I was on the stairs. And Grandma, they were talking about you, about your house. He stopped. "It is okay," I said. "Tell me." "Dad said something about the power of attorney," Caleb said. "He said now that you were sick, they could use it to sell your house while they still could. And Mom said something about a place. A cheaper place. A home. Like one of those places you put old people. She said it would be easier, and then the house money would stay in the family instead of going to doctors. And Grandma, they were not sad about it. They were figuring it out. Like it was a math problem. I held the phone and I looked out my kitchen window at the dark backyard, and I was not even surprised. That is the thing that struck me. I was not surprised? Some part of me had already known. I did not say anything for a moment, and Caleb said, "Grandma, are you there?" "I am here," I said. And then he said the thing that broke my heart clean in half. "I kept thinking I should warn you," he said, "but I did not know how. And then you got sick, and they went to Italy and left you, and I felt so bad because I could not do anything. I am 16. I do not have a car. I could not even drive you." "Caleb," I said, "listen to me. You did not do anything wrong. You are the only one who ever did anything right." I told him then, gentle as I could, that I already knew about the accounts. That my lawyer had found the money his mother took. That I had already taken the power of attorney back, already changed everything, already made sure the house could not be touched. He got quiet, and then he said, "So they cannot do it. The thing they planned." "No," I said. "They cannot. You do not have to carry that anymore. I took care of it." He let out a breath like he had been holding it for weeks. Then he said, "Can I come see you? Just me. I could ride my bike over on Saturday." And I said yes before he even finished the sentence. He came Saturday morning. I heard the bike tires on the gravel, and I opened the door, and there he was, taller than the last time, a little sunburn on his nose, and in his hands he was holding something wrapped in a dish towel. He came in and set it on the table and unwrapped it, and I put my hand over my mouth. It was the bell, the little brass bell from my classroom, the one I rang for 31 years to call the children in from recess. I had left it behind when I retired, thought it belonged to the school. Caleb grinned. "I went by Maple Street," he said. "I told the office it was yours, that you rang it for like 1,000,000 kids. The lady there remembered you. She said take it. She said it was always yours." I held that bell in both hands, and I rang it once soft, right there in my kitchen. And I want to tell you of all the money and all the papers and all the accounts, that little brass bell was worth more to me than any of it, because my grandson thought of me. He rode his bike across town to bring me a piece of who I used to be. That is what family is. It is not the word posted under a photograph. It is a boy on a bicycle with a bell wrapped in a dish towel. He asked me about it that day. He wanted to know how it worked back when I taught. So I told him. I told him how I would stand on the back step of the school at the end of recess and ring it, and how a whole field full of running, shouting children would stop and turn and come toward the sound. I told him some of them ran and some of them dragged their feet, but they all came because they knew the bell meant it was time to come in where it was warm. That is all a teacher really is, I told him. Somebody standing at the door ringing a bell telling the children it is safe to come in now. Caleb looked at me a long moment after I said that, and then he said real quiet, "You were still doing that. For me. This whole time." And I had to turn around and busy myself with the kettle so he would not see my face. We sat and ate pancakes after that, and he told me about school, and about a teacher he liked who had been a reporter before, and about a girl who kept borrowing his notes and never gave them back. Ordinary things. Wonderful ordinary things. I let his voice wash over me like warm rain, the way I used to do with my students when they were reading aloud and stumbling over the hard words, and did not need me to correct them just to listen. I had put the house up for sale by then. Nancy helped me do it right. I did not need a house that big anymore with all its empty rooms and all its echoes. I found a realtor named Frank, a soft-spoken man who had helped me refinance years back, and he walked through the rooms with me like they were old friends. "Are you sure?" he asked me in the backyard, the yard I had mowed every Sunday even when my knees ached. "I am sure," I said. "I need something simpler, something that does not echo so loud." It took time the way these things really do. Frank listed it, and we had showings and offers came in, and there were inspections and papers, and a closing date set out a good 6 weeks. That is how it works. It is not a thing you do in an afternoon. All through those weeks, Teresa drove me to my treatments Monday after Monday, and we got to be real friends. She would wait in the clinic, and we would talk about her mother, and about the old days at Maple Street, and about her kids. She never once made me feel like a burden. Not once. I picked the buyers myself. A young family with 2 little girls and a dog. They wrote me a letter, said they loved how the afternoon light came through the front porch, said it felt like a house with stories in it. They were right. When I signed the papers, I did not cry. Not when I handed Frank the keys. Not when I walked through the empty kitchen one last time. Not even when I stood in the driveway and looked back at the front window where Lauren used to tape her drawings when she was small. Just breath deep and steady. The money went into a new account, quiet, separate, tied to the trust for Caleb. And what I kept for myself bought me a spot at a place called Cedar Hollow. A little 1-bedroom, a small kitchen of my own wide windows, and quiet. I moved in with 3 suitcases and a box of books and that brass bell. Lauren found out I sold the house before I told her. A neighbor saw the sold sign and texted her. She called me, and her voice came fast and tight the way it did when she was trying to sound calm and could not quite manage it. "Mom," she said, "I just saw. You sold the house. Why did you not tell me?" I was sitting by my new window watching 2 squirrels fight over a crust of bread. I let her question hang a moment. "Yes," I said. "I sold it." "But why did you not tell me?" she said again. "I did not think you would be interested," I said. "You are usually so busy." "That was our house," she said. "My childhood." "It was my house," I said. Not loud, just plain. I bought it. I paid off every dollar of it. I paid for every pipe and every shingle and every grocery that ever crossed the threshold. She did not have an answer for that. So she changed the subject. "Where are you living?" she asked. "In a place that fits," I said. "With people who do not forget I exist." She did not like that. "Mom, is this about the trip?" she said. I looked at the clock on my wall. She had lasted about 9 minutes before she brought it up. "I did not call to fight," she added quickly. "I just feel like you are making big decisions without me. Sweetheart, I said you were not involved when I was too sick to drive myself to chemo. I do not see why you would need to be involved now." The line went silent. "Are you mad at me?" she finally said, and that almost made me laugh. "I am not mad, Lauren," I said. "I am clear. There is a difference." She came to Cedar Hollow the following week. No call, no warning. Just her tall figure at the glass doors in a good coat, her hand tight around an expensive purse like it was holding her up. The woman at the front desk knocked on my door and said there was a woman here, said she was my daughter. My heart did not race. It did not even stir. "Let her in," I said. Lauren came in with that energy. She has the energy of someone used to running a room and unsure what to do when the room does not jump. She looked around my little apartment, the teacup, the blanket, the bell on the shelf. I watched her take it all in. She did not sit down. "You could have told me," she said. "No hello." "I did," I said. "On the phone." "No," she said. "Before you did all of it, the house, the will, the accounts." "I had to hear about the accounts from a letter from your lawyer, Mom, a demand for accounting." "Do you know how that felt?" I looked at her steady. "I know how a lot of things feel," I said. Her jaw tightened. Then she tried a softer voice. "Mom," she said, "we can fix this. Just undo whatever you signed. You can come stay with us. I will help more, I promise." I tilted my head. "Now that the money is not coming your way," I said, "you suddenly remember I exist." Her face went red. "That is not fair," she said. "It is accurate," I said. And then because I was done holding it, I said the rest. "I know about the money, Lauren. I know you used the power of attorney to move it out of my accounts over and over for almost 2 years. I know the biggest one paid for that trip. The trip you took while I sat alone under a needle. And I know what you and Craig said in the kitchen the night before you left. About selling my house out from under me and putting me somewhere cheap so the money would stay in the family." She went pale. Her mouth opened and closed. How she started. "Caleb," she said, and there was something ugly starting in her face, and I stopped it cold. "Do not," I said. "Do not you dare be angry at that boy. He is the only one in your house with a heart. He tried to warn me because he loves me. Something you might try someday." She sat back like I had pushed her, and for a second I saw the little girl in her, the 4-year-old on the counter with batter on her chin, the teenager gripping my arm at graduation. I saw all the years I had poured into her, and I felt the old pull to soften, to reach across the table to say, "Never mind, it is all right. Do not worry about it." That pull had run my whole life. It was the strongest thing in me. And I sat there, and I felt it, and I did not move, because I finally understood what that softness had cost me. Every time I had said, "Do not worry about it," I had taught her that she did not have to. I had trained her over 40 years, one gentle excuse at a time, to believe that I would always be there and would never ask for anything back. I had made myself so easy to take for granted that taking me for granted was the only thing she knew how to do. That was not all her fault. Some of it was mine for never once teaching her there was a bottom to the well. Well, she had found the bottom now. She sat down then. She had to. And the whole story came out of her in pieces the way the truth does when it has been held too long. She and Craig were in debt. Deep. His business had gone bad and they had borrowed against everything and they were drowning. And my house, my paid-off house, and whatever I left behind, that had been the plan all along. The thing that was going to save them. Family First had never once been about me. It had been about what I was worth to them dead or too sick to notice. I did not shout. I want you to know that. I had shouted plenty in my life at bad report cards and broken curfews, but not this time. This time I just talked quiet and even, and I laid it all out. Everything I had given, every check, every bill, every year I skipped things I wanted so she could have things she needed. And every time she had left me waiting by a phone or a window or in a clinic, I laid it down like cards on a table. "So that is it," she said finally, and her voice was small. "You are cutting me off. You are punishing me." "No," I said. "I am releasing myself." From what she whispered. "From being someone's backup plan," I said. "From being the invisible woman behind every check you cashed and every ride you never offered. From telling myself for 40 years that love meant staying quiet no matter how little came back." Her lips parted. She looked younger all of a sudden. Lost. "I did not think you would really walk away," she said. "I did not think you would ever make me want to," I said. I stood and I opened the door. "Caleb will always be welcome here," I said. "Always. As for you, you are going to have to figure out how to be part of somebody's life without owning it. I do not know if you can. I hope you can. But I am not going to wait around to find out anymore." She stood there frozen a moment. Then she picked up her purse and stepped into the hall. "I will call you," she said. I did not answer. I just closed the door soft. And for the first time in my whole life, closing a door on my family did not feel like losing something. It felt like opening one to myself. That night I sat by my window with a cup of tea, the real one I keep now, and I rang that little brass bell once just to hear it. And I thought about all the children I called in with that bell over 31 years. All the ones like Teresa who I never knew I reached until she reached back 40 years later in a waiting room. You never do know what sticks. You just do the small kind things and send them out and hope. I healed slow. The treatments went on and some days were hard and Teresa drove me through most of them. Caleb came on Saturdays and we made pancakes the way I used to make them for his mother when she was 4, back when it was all we had. He was good at cracking the eggs and terrible at the flipping, and we laughed about it every time. He made the debate team that spring. He talked about studying history someday. I listened, really listened the way nobody listens to you when you are 16 and just starting to figure out who you are. Lauren called twice more that year. Short calls. I was polite. I did not go back. Some endings do not need a fight. Sometimes the clearest ending is a quiet one. That was the end of the hardest part. Not the sickness. The sickness went on. But the part where I had to decide whether I was worth standing up for that part was over, and I had answered it. I had answered it in a lawyer's office, and a doctor's letter, and a signature on a will, and I had answered it again standing in my own doorway, watching my daughter walk away. The answer was yes. After 78 years, the answer was finally yes. What came after was quieter, and in some ways it was the best of it, and I will tell you about that part now. The seasons turned the way they do whether you are watching or not. I had come to Cedar Hollow at the tail end of summer with 3 suitcases and a box of books and a brass bell. By the time the leaves started going gold outside my window, it did not feel like a place I was staying anymore. It felt like a place I lived. I want to tell you about the days because the days are what a life is really made of. Nobody talks about that. They talk about the big moments, the weddings and the funerals and the fights. But a life is mostly mornings. And my mornings at Cedar Hollow were the best I had known in years. I would wake before the light most days. Not from pain and not from worry, the 2 things that used to pull me out of sleep at home. Just awake. I would put the kettle on and I would sit by the window in the soft chair and watch the color come up over the trees. I never knew how peaceful 6 in the morning could be when no one in the world was waiting on you for anything. When there was no phone to check for a message that never came. When the only thing on the list was to drink your tea while it was hot. I unpacked slow over the first couple of weeks. I did not hang much on the walls. After a lifetime of a house crammed full of other people's leavings, I liked the clean space, the stillness of it. I set out the bell on a shelf where I could see it. I put a photo of Caleb by the window. I found a home for the little chipped teacup I have carried through 3 decades, the one with the crack near the handle that I mended with glue and stubbornness years ago. I hold that cup careful now, not because it is fragile, but because I am and there is no shame in it. A thing that has been mended and still holds is not weak. It is proven. There was a woman down the hall named Lorraine who became my first real friend there. She was 79 sharp as a tack, and she had opinions about everything from the weather to the cafeteria coffee. If you do not sit next to me at lunch, she told me my second day, I will end up next to Walt, and Walt talks about his hip replacement like it is a war story. I laughed harder than I had laughed in a year, and after that we sat together every day. Lorraine had been a bookkeeper for a lumber company for 40 years, and she had a way of looking at a person and knowing exactly how much they were leaving out. She never made me explain myself. There is a special kindness in people who know how to leave a little space around you. I made other friends, too. Jenny in the unit above me, who painted birds. Walt Hipstory and all who turned out to be the gentlest man I ever met, and who always carried butterscotch candies in his cardigan for anyone who looked like they were having a hard day. We were a strange little family, all of us, the leftover people, the ones whose big lives had gotten small. But nobody at that table ever forgot my birthday. Nobody there ever left me sitting alone. Teresa still drove me to my treatments. Her mother had finished her own rounds by then and gotten some good news, the kind you learn not to take for granted, and you would think Teresa might have stopped coming around once she did not have to be at that clinic anymore. But she did not stop. She just kept showing up. She would pick me up on Mondays, and we would go early and get a bad cup of coffee from the machine and sit and talk before my name got called. She told me once on one of those mornings that driving me was the easiest thing she had ever been asked to do, and that she wished more people understood how little it took to matter to somebody. I told her she had learned that lesson a lot younger than I did. She just squeezed my hand. One afternoon, Teresa brought her mother by to meet me. A small woman, thin from the treatments, with the same quiet strength I could see Teresa had gotten from her. She held both my hands in hers and she said, "You are the teacher, the one with the boots. Teresa has talked about you her whole life. You have no idea what you did for her." And I stood there in my little apartment, an old woman, and I understood something I had spent my whole career not quite letting myself believe, that the small things you do for people do not disappear. They just wait. Sometimes 40 years, and then they come back around when you need them most. Caleb came every Saturday he could. He would ride his bike over, or sometimes a friend with a license would drop him, and we would spend the morning together. We made pancakes almost every time the way I used to make them for his mother when she was 4 years old, and it was all we could afford. He was good at cracking the eggs and hopeless at the flip, and half of them ended up folded over on themselves, and we ate them anyway and called them a new invention. He talked to me the way you talk to somebody you trust, about school, about a girl he liked, about not knowing what he wanted to do with his life. I told him nobody knows at 16, and half of us never figure it out, and that the trick is just to stay curious and stay kind and let the rest sort itself. He made the debate team that year, and then he made the finals, and I sat in a folding chair in a high school gym and watched him stand up in front of a room full of strangers and argue his case with his voice shaking a little and his chin up. I cried, of course. I am an old woman. That is allowed. Afterward, he found me in the crowd and hugged me right there in front of his friends, not embarrassed at all, and he said, "Thanks for coming, Grandma." Nobody else did. And I held on to him and did not let go for a good long while. His mother did not come to the finals. I want to be honest about that because I am not going to pretend the story ended with everybody fixed. It did not. Lauren and I did not have some big tearful reunion. Life is not a movie. What we had was smaller and slower than that. She called me now and then. The calls were short and careful, both of us feeling around the edges of what we were now. I was polite. I always answered. But I did not go back to being what I had been. I did not open the accounts back up. I did not tear up the will. Some part of her, I think, kept waiting for me to soften, to forget to be the mother who always said, "Do not worry about it." And I just was not that woman anymore. She had cost me too much to find out who I really was for me to hand it back. Around Christmas, a card came in the mail. Plain white envelope, no return address, but I knew the handwriting. Inside there was just one line written in that pen she always pressed too hard with. I am sorry I failed you. No name. She did not need to sign it. I set that card on my kitchen shelf next to the bell, and I did not write back. Not out of meanness. I just let it sit there. Let her sit in that quiet for once the way she had left me sitting in so many quiet rooms. Some things you do not rescue people from. Some things they have to feel all the way through or they never change at all. I will tell you, though, that card did something to me. Not what she probably hoped. It did not make me want to undo anything. But it loosened a knot I had been carrying a long time. Because for years I had wondered if it was me. If I had done something wrong, been too much, been too little, failed her somehow. And that one line told me she knew. She knew exactly what she had done. And that meant I could finally stop carrying the part of it that was never mine to carry. That night I did something I had not done in years. I sat down at my little desk with a pen and a pad and I wrote a letter. Not to Lauren, not to Caleb, not to anybody I was going to mail it to. I wrote a letter to myself, to the woman I used to be. You tried so hard, I wrote to her. You gave, and you thought that if you just gave enough, you would finally be worth keeping. You thought being needed was the same as being loved. You thought staying quiet was a kind of grace. You told yourself the disappointment was just the price of loving somebody, and you paid it over and over for 40 years. But I want you to know something now from the other side of it. You were never too much. You were never a burden. You were just too easy to take from because you never once said stop, and you were always enough. I wrote for a long time that night. I wrote things I had never said to a living soul, about how scared I had been my whole life of being left so scared that I spent every dollar and every ounce of myself trying to make sure nobody had a reason to leave, about how that fear had made me easy to use, and how the people who use you can always smell that fear on you the way a dog smells it, about how the great joke of my life was that I had been left anyway in the end by the one person I had bankrupted myself to keep. And that being left had turned out to be the thing that finally set me free. The tears came then. Not the hard kind. The slow kind. The kind that comes loose when somebody finally says the true thing to you, even if that somebody is just yourself with a pen. I folded the letter and I put it in the drawer of my little desk, and I felt lighter the next morning than I had felt in a decade. I did not need anyone to read it. It was not for anyone. It was a letter from the woman I had become to the woman I used to be. And the only thing it said underneath all the words was this: I see you now. I am sorry it took me so long. You can rest. The residents at Cedar Hollow threw a gathering that fall. Nothing fancy. Cider in paper cups, a tray of cookies, folding chairs out under the big maple tree that dropped its leaves like slow confetti. Somebody brought an old record player and played jazz that had nowhere better to be. I wore my navy cardigan, the one with the little mended patch near the wrist, and I did not need to impress a soul. I just wanted to feel like myself, and for once I did. Caleb showed up in the middle of it unannounced, holding a paper bag from the farmer's market. Surprise, he said. Do not get excited, it is mostly apples. Inside were 3 honey-crisp apples and a jar of strawberry jam and a little round cheese that smelled like rosemary, and I told him it was the best gift I had gotten in years, and I meant it. He sat down beside me, and Lorraine leaned over and whispered, Is that your grandson? And when I said yes, that is mine, she said, Well, no wonder you talk about him so much. The music was playing, and the light was going gold and low, and Caleb stood up and held out his hand. Dance with me, he said. Here, I said, in front of everybody. We will embarrass the furniture. Please, he grinned. You always told me to say yes to joy. And I had. I had told him that years ago after he broke his arm falling out of a tree and cried not from the pain, but because he thought he would never play again. Say yes to joy, I told him then, even when it hurts, especially then. So I took his hand, and we danced slow and awkward and lovely, him too tall and me too stiff, and it did not matter one bit. Lorraine clapped. Walt whistled through his fingers like a much younger man. Somebody called out, Now that is the spirit. And for a few minutes the whole world was just a rhythm and a heartbeat, and a boy I once rocked to sleep, now the one keeping me steady on my feet. When the song ended, we took a little bow and everybody laughed, and as we sat back down, Caleb leaned close and said quiet so only I could hear, Thank you for not giving up. and I squeezed his hand and told him the truth. "You are the reason I did not," I said. "I healed slow on my own time. The treatments went on into the winter, and some days were harder than I will put into words here, but I was never alone for them. Teresa on Mondays, Caleb on Saturdays, Lorraine across the lunch table, Walt with his butterscotch. A whole life small and warm, and mine built out of people who chose to show up. Not one of them owed me a thing. That is what I finally understood sitting by my window that winter. The people who love you are not the ones who are supposed to. They are the ones who just do. The manager asked me that spring if I would help the new residents get settled, show them around since I had made my little corner feel so much like a home. I said yes. Not because I was all better. I was not, and I will not lie to you and say the cancer packed up and left. It did not. But I was healing where it counted in the place inside a person that decides whether they are worth their own kindness. And I had decided. Finally, after 78 years, I had decided that I was. Some evenings now I take the brass bell down off the shelf and I ring it once just to hear it, and I think about all the children I called in from the cold with that sound over 31 years. Teresa was one of them. So were 1,000 others I will never hear from out there, living lives I helped set going without ever knowing it. You do the small kind things and you send them out into the world, and you do not get to know which ones took root. You just have to trust that some of them did. So here is what I want to say to you if you have listened this far. If any part of my story felt like your own, if you have waited by phones that did not ring, and windows that stayed empty, and doors that never opened for you, I want you to hear an old woman tell you this plain. You are not just the sum of what you have given away. You are what you choose right now today with whatever you have left. It is not too late. It is never too late to stop paying a price nobody should have asked of you. Pour yourself the tea. Sit down by your own window. Say no to the ones who only remember you when they need something. Say yes to the ones who show up in the cold. And if there is a bell somewhere that used to be yours, a sound that used to mean you mattered, go find it. Ring it. You are still here. And you are still after everything worth calling home.